In a small, peaceful town named Riverside, everyone knew one name, Mrs. Clara Jenkins. She was a third-grade teacher at Maplewood Elementary School, and people said she was the kind of teacher every child deserved. She had a calm smile, soft voice, and eyes that always showed kindness. Every morning, she arrived early, holding her cup of coffee and a stack of colorful worksheets for her little students. Her classroom was warm and full of life. Drawings covered the walls, rainbows, smiling suns, and stick figures holding hands. The kids adored her. They called her Miss J. Parents often said their children loved school only because of her. She organized fun reading sessions, art contests, and story time that made even shy kids speak up. To everyone, Clara was perfect, patient, caring, and always ready to help. But behind her warm smile, there was something no one noticed. Something small, strange, and quiet. Every day after school, when the bell rang and the children ran out, Clara stayed back in the empty classroom. She said she liked to plan lessons. Sometimes, the janitor saw her talking to herself, softly smiling at the children's desks, as if the classroom wasn't empty at all. When he once joked, "Working late again, Miss J?" she simply smiled and replied, "I like it when it's quiet. The children still feel here somehow." No one thought much of it. After all, teachers are emotional, right? But for some reason, those words stayed with the janitor. One evening, a little girl named Emma, one of Clara's students, forgot her lunchbox. Her mother returned to school to get it. The school was almost dark, the hallways empty. When she reached Clara's classroom, she saw a faint light coming from inside. The door was half open. Inside, Clara sat on a small chair, whispering softly to an empty seat. She was smiling, but her smile looked wrong. The mother froze. Then Clara looked up and saw her standing there. "Oh, Mrs. Green," she said cheerfully, "I was just rehearsing a story for tomorrow's class." Her tone was polite, but her eyes seemed cold for a moment, just for a second. The mother laughed nervously and took the lunchbox, saying, "Of course, sorry to interrupt." When she walked out, her hands were shaking. She told herself it was nothing, just imagination. Next morning, Clara was back to her usual self, smiling, energetic, and kind. No one would believe she could ever act strange. Parents greeted her warmly. The principal praised her teaching skills. She even received an award for being Teacher of the Year. Everything was perfect again. Or at least, it looked that way. But soon, strange things began to happen. A few students told their parents that Miss J sometimes got angry for no reason. One boy said she told him to never talk about what happens after class. Another child claimed Clara made them draw pictures of sad faces and dark rooms. Parents thought the kids were joking. Kids always make up stories, right? Until one morning, a police car appeared in front of Maplewood Elementary. 2 officers walked into the school. Teachers stopped talking. Children stared from the playground. And then, in complete silence, Mrs. Clara Jenkins walked out of the building, her hands behind her back, handcuffed. No one said a word. Some kids began to cry. The woman everyone loved was being taken away. The news spread across town like wildfire. How could she do something like this? What did she do? Is it true? But no one knew the truth. Not yet. As the police car drove away, the principal whispered, "She was the best teacher we ever had." And in that quiet moment, the town realized they never really knew her at all. The morning after Mrs. Clara Jenkins' arrest, the town of Riverside woke up in complete shock. Nobody could believe what had happened. The news spread faster than wildfire. From phones to TV screens, from small cafes to school hallways. Every headline screamed the same thing. Beloved third-grade teacher charged with a horrifying crime. At Maplewood Elementary, the air felt heavy. The children were confused, scared, and silent. Desks that once echoed laughter now felt empty. Some students kept asking, "When will Miss J come back?" But no one had an answer. Teachers whispered in the staff room. The principal, Mr. Howard, looked pale and restless. He refused to speak to reporters standing outside the school gates. Outside, camera flashes lit up like lightning. News vans lined the street. Parents stood in groups whispering in disbelief. "There must be a mistake," one mother said. "She was so kind." Another whispered, "I never liked how she stared at the kids." Something felt off. Inside the police station, reporters tried to get answers. Officer Daniels, the lead investigator, spoke briefly to the press. "All I can say," he said, "is that serious evidence has been found at Mrs. Jenkins' residence. The investigation is ongoing." He refused to say more, but his cold tone made everyone uneasy. Meanwhile, a young journalist named Ben Parker was sitting in his small office downtown. He worked for the Riverside Daily Chronicle and had a reputation for chasing the truth, even when it was dangerous. When he saw Clara's photo on the news, he couldn't look away. He remembered her. Years ago, she had taught his niece. She was everyone's favorite, Ben muttered to himself. There has to be more to this. He decided to investigate the story. The first thing he noticed was strange. No one knew much about Clara's personal life. She had no close friends, no family visits, and no photos of relatives in her house or classroom. She always said she lived alone and preferred quiet weekends. To most people, that just made her seem private. But to Ben, it was unusual. That night, he stood outside Clara's small white house on Pine Street. The windows were dark, sealed with yellow police tape. A faint light from a nearby street lamp cast a shadow across her front porch. Neighbors gathered, whispering. One of them, an elderly woman named Mrs. Peterson, shook her head slowly. "She was such a nice lady," she said softly. "Always helped me carry groceries." "But," Ben turned to her. "But what?" Mrs. Peterson looked nervous. "Some nights I heard children's voices, laughter, and sometimes crying. But she lived alone. I told myself it was my imagination." Her hands trembled. "Now I'm not so sure." Ben wrote everything down. The more he learned, the darker the story became. Clara wasn't just a teacher. She had changed her name 8 years ago. Before that, she had lived in another town. A town where a young child had mysteriously disappeared. The case was never solved. There were no suspects, no leads. Until now. At the same time, people in Riverside were losing trust. Parents pulled their children out of school. Teachers resigned. News channels showed endless clips of Clara being taken away in handcuffs. The once peaceful town was now drowning in fear and gossip. Late one evening, as Ben reviewed his notes, his phone buzzed. It was an unknown number. A deep, quiet voice spoke on the other end. "If you want the truth about Clara Jenkins," the voice said, "look into her past. Start with the year 2015. Then the line went dead. Ben's heart raced. 2015, the same year the missing child case had gone cold. He leaned back in his chair, staring at Clara's smiling face in an old-school photo. "She doesn't look like a monster," he whispered. But then again, monsters rarely do. Outside, thunder rolled across the sky, and in the distance, sirens wailed, as if the town of Riverside was about to uncover something far worse than anyone could imagine. The story of Mrs. Clara Jenkins was on every screen, every newspaper, and in every whispered conversation. But for Ben Parker, the young journalist, the case had just begun. Something about Clara didn't fit the picture of a cold-hearted criminal. There were too many gaps, too many questions that nobody was asking. Ben started his search in the local library, scrolling through old digital records. The name Clara Jenkins didn't appear anywhere before 2016. It was as if she had simply appeared out of thin air that year. No school records, no job applications, no address, nothing. But then Ben found something. A document from another state. A teacher's license belonging to a Clara Benson, issued in 2010. He frowned. Same birth date. Same photo. Why would she change her name? He whispered. He decided to visit the small town listed on the document. Hilford, a quiet place 2 hours away. The locals were polite but cautious when he mentioned her name. One older man, sitting outside a diner, looked up from his coffee and said, "You're talking about Miss Benson? The teacher who left after that tragedy?" Ben's pen froze midair. "What tragedy?" The man sighed. "The missing boy. Little Adam Cooper. Everyone thought she knew something, but police never proved it." Then she just disappeared. Ben's stomach tightened. Clara Jenkins and Clara Benson were the same person, and she had been living under a new identity all these years. But why? He found the address where Clara used to live. The house was abandoned. Windows broken, paint peeling, weeds crawling up the walls. Inside, dust covered everything. But on one wall, faint and faded, Ben saw something that made his blood run cold. Drawings. Childlike sketches in crayon. Smiling faces. A woman and a small boy holding hands. Underneath one picture, in shaky letters, it said, "Me and Miss Clara." Ben stepped back. The air in the room felt heavy. He took photos and left quickly, his heart pounding. Back in Riverside, the police investigation was moving quietly but fast. Officer Daniels had just received a sealed report from the Hilford police. Inside were old case files, photos, and witness statements from 2015, the year the boy disappeared. Every page told the same story. Adam Cooper, 7 years old, vanished after school. His parents said he stayed late to help his teacher, Miss Clara Benson. When they asked Clara, she said the boy never came to class that day. But one janitor had seen them together after school hours. There wasn't enough proof then, just suspicion. The case went cold. Now, 10 years later, all the pieces were connecting again. Ben went to meet Officer Daniels at the station. He showed the detective the photos from Hilford. Daniels looked at them carefully and said, "You may have just opened the door we couldn't before." That night, Ben couldn't sleep. He kept replaying everything, the new name, the drawings, the missing child. He opened his laptop and compared the two photos. Miss Clara Benson from 2015 and Mrs. Clara Jenkins from 2025. Same gentle smile, same calm eyes, but behind them, something else, something dark and unspoken. The next morning, Ben got another call. The same unknown number. "Stop digging," the voice said. "You don't know what you're waking up." Then silence. Ben's hands trembled. Someone didn't want the truth to come out. But he was too deep now to stop. He printed every photo, every note, and pinned them on his wall. Strings connected names, dates, and places, like a puzzle forming a frightening picture. At the center of it all was one face, Clara Jenkins. By evening, Ben received a message from an old Hilford police officer. It was short. "If you want proof, check the basement of her old Hilford house. We never searched it completely. Too dangerous back then." Ben packed his camera and flashlight. As he drove toward Hilford, rain started pouring hard. The road was empty, dark, and quiet, the kind of quiet that warns you something terrible is waiting. When he reached the old house, thunder cracked above. The door creaked open on its own. He stepped inside. The air smelled of dust and something else, something metallic. At the corner of the living room, half hidden under a carpet, he saw a trap door. His hands shook as he pulled it open. Cold air rushed up from below, and there, in the darkness, something moved. The rain poured harder as Ben Parker stood above the open trap door. Cold air rushed from the basement below, smelling of damp wood and rust. His flashlight trembled in his hand. For a long moment he didn't move. Every instinct told him to leave. But his curiosity was stronger than fear. He slowly climbed down the narrow steps. The light flickered against the walls, revealing dust-covered shelves and broken boxes. The basement was larger than he expected. Old school papers, children's drawings, and small wooden chairs were scattered everywhere. On one wall, faint letters were scratched into the surface. "Classroom B." Ben's heartbeat quickened. It looked like a classroom. Inside her house. He took a few steps forward. The beam of his flashlight landed on a small table. On it were tiny notebooks, name tags, and crayons, all labeled with names: Adam, Lucy, Benji, Sophie. He realized these were the names of her old students from Hilford. Suddenly, a noise echoed behind him, a faint creak, like footsteps on wood. He froze. "Hello?" he called out. Only silence answered. Then a drop of water fell from the ceiling, hitting the floor with a soft echo. He continued searching, his camera flashing as he took photos. Then his light caught something unusual at the far end. A curtain. Behind it stood a locked metal door. It had deep scratches all over it, as if someone had tried to break out. Beside the door, pinned to the wall, was a single photograph. It was of Mrs. Clara Benson, smiling, standing beside a little boy. The same missing child, Adam Cooper. Ben's throat went dry. He tried the handle. It didn't move. Then he noticed a small box on the floor, half covered in dust. Inside it, he found an old cassette recorder. He pressed play. A woman's voice filled the room, calm, gentle, and familiar. "Adam, sit down, please. You must listen to me. The world outside is dangerous. You're safe here with me." There was a pause. Then the voice trembled. "Don't cry, sweetheart. Mommy loves you." The tape clicked off. Ben stepped back, his mind spinning. "Mommy?" he whispered. She thought she was his mother. As he turned, he saw something carved into the floor. Using his flashlight, he read the words slowly. "They said I'm a monster, but monsters protect their children." Before he could think, his phone buzzed loudly, making him jump. It was Officer Daniels. "Ben, we just got new information. Get out of that house now." But the line broke before Ben could answer. The lights flickered once, twice, and then went out completely. He stood in total darkness, hearing only the rain above and his own breathing. He switched on his phone's flashlight and ran toward the stairs. But when he reached them, the trap door was shut. He pushed hard, but it wouldn't budge. "Hello, anybody there?" he shouted. No response. Something scraped across the floor above him. Then a faint whisper drifted through the air. "Ben." His heart almost stopped. The voice was soft, feminine, and terribly familiar. He spun around, light shaking in his hand. "Who's there?" The whisper came again, closer this time. "You shouldn't have come here." Then, silence. Only the hum of rain. Moments later, a loud crack broke the quiet. The trap door suddenly opened and Officer Daniels appeared, flashlight in hand. "Come on!" he yelled. Ben climbed out, gasping for air. Together, they left the house, drenched and breathless. Daniels locked the door behind them and said, "We found something worse. There's another property, in Riverside. Her current home. We think she recreated the same basement there." Ben looked at him, stunned. "Another one?" Daniels nodded grimly. "And this time, we have witnesses who heard screams." Ben felt cold all over. As they drove through the storm toward Riverside, he looked back once at the dark Hilford house. Lightning flashed, and for a split second he saw a figure in the window. A woman, standing still, smiling faintly. When the light faded, she was gone. The rain had stopped by morning, but the town of Riverside was still drowning in fear. The news of the second basement had shaken everyone. Reporters stood outside the police station waiting for answers. But behind those walls, something far more disturbing was unfolding. Inside the interrogation room, Mrs. Clara Jenkins sat silently. Her face was pale, her hands folded neatly on the table. She looked calm. Too calm for someone accused of such terrible crimes. Officer Daniels entered with 2 detectives. They had been awake all night, reviewing what they found in both houses. On the table lay photographs, children's drawings, the cassette tape, and the names of missing kids from 2 towns. Daniels placed the Hilford photo of Adam Cooper in front of her. "Who is this boy?" he asked firmly. Clara looked down at the picture. For a long time, she didn't speak. Then she smiled faintly and said, "My son." Daniels frowned. "He wasn't your son, Mrs. Jenkins. He was your student." She shook her head slowly. "He needed a mother. The world forgot him. I didn't." Her voice was soft, almost gentle, but her words sent chills through everyone in the room. Ben Parker watched through the observation window. He'd been allowed to record the session. Hearing her calm tone made his stomach twist. Daniels leaned closer. "You kept him locked in that basement, didn't you?" Clara's smile faded. "I kept him safe. The outside world is cruel. You don't understand." She paused, staring blankly at the wall. The others didn't understand either. "They wanted to take my children away. I couldn't let that happen again." "The others?" Daniels asked sharply. Clara looked up, her eyes cold. "The children of Maplewood. My class, they needed me too. I protected them." A heavy silence filled the room. Daniels turned off the recorder. "You're not protecting anyone," he said quietly. "You're destroying them." Meanwhile, at the Riverside house, forensic teams uncovered what truly happened. Beneath layers of cement, they found a small hidden chamber, perfectly soundproof. Inside were toys, storybooks, and a single small chair. On the walls were drawings, stick figures of a woman and children. The words "Mom" were written again and again in red crayon. Next to the chair was an old photograph. It showed Clara surrounded by a group of kids, all smiling. None of those children existed in school records. When Ben saw the photos, his heart sank. The truth was clear now. Clara wasn't just lonely. She was broken. In her mind, she was still a teacher. But her classroom had turned into a prison. He remembered her voice on the tape. "You're safe here with me." Safe. That word haunted him. Days later, in court, Clara finally spoke. Reporters filled every seat. Cameras flashed as she walked in wearing a simple gray dress, her wrists in cuffs. She looked around the room as if searching for familiar faces. Maybe her students. The judge asked her to explain her actions. Clara raised her head and said softly, "They were my children. The world hurt them. I gave them love." Her lawyer tried to argue mental illness. Psychologists said she suffered from severe delusional maternal syndrome, believing she had to save children from the world by keeping them hidden. But no one could understand how far she had gone. When the verdict was announced, guilty on all counts, Clara didn't cry or protest. She simply nodded as if she already knew. As officers led her away, she turned to the crowd and said quietly, "You don't have to thank me. They're safe now." Her voice echoed through the courtroom, sending a shiver down every spine. That night, Ben finished his article. The headline read, "The Teacher Who Wanted to Save the World, and Lost Herself Instead." He looked at Clara's photo one last time. That gentle smile, once filled with warmth, now looked terrifying. He whispered to himself, "Maybe monsters are born from love gone wrong." Outside the courthouse, a storm was forming again, as if the town itself could not wash away the darkness she had left behind. Weeks passed after the trial, yet the town of Riverside refused to heal. The school gates of Maplewood Elementary remained locked, the playground empty and silent. The laughter of children was replaced by the sound of wind moving through broken swings. The people of Riverside whispered her name like a curse, Mrs. Clara Jenkins, the teacher they once trusted. Inside a cold gray prison cell, Clara sat by the tiny window, staring at the rain outside. The world had decided her fate. She would spend the rest of her life behind bars. But to her, this wasn't punishment. She believed she had done the right thing. She still whispered lessons to herself, pretending her students were sitting before her. "Good morning, class," she said softly, smiling at the empty space. "Today, we'll talk about kindness." The guards often heard her talking, sometimes laughing, sometimes singing lullabies to no one. They called her the quiet teacher. She never argued, never complained, but her eyes were always distant, like she lived in another world. Meanwhile, Ben Parker's article had gone viral. He had become a national name overnight, praised for uncovering the truth. But the fame didn't make him happy. At night he couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he heard that tape again, Clara's calm voice saying, "You're safe here with me." The words echoed like a lullaby that refused to fade. He decided to visit her in prison for one last interview. Maybe he wanted closure. Maybe he wanted to understand. When he entered the visiting room, Clara was already there, hands folded neatly, wearing the same soft smile. "Mr. Parker," she said politely, "I knew you'd come." "You're curious, just like my students." Ben sat down. The metal table between them felt colder than ever. "I don't understand you," he said quietly. "You destroyed families. You hurt children. Why?" Clara tilted her head as if she couldn't see the harm. "They weren't hurt," she whispered. "They were saved. I took them away from the pain, from the cruelty outside. I gave them peace. Ben's voice shook. They were prisoners, not children. You locked them away. Clara's eyes darkened for the first time. Would you call a mother a jailer because she keeps her child safe? Her tone turned sharp, then calm again. The world fails children every day, Mr. Parker. I didn't. For a moment, Ben had no answer. He realized she truly believed every word. Her mind was a cage, and she was trapped inside it. Before he left, Clara leaned forward slightly and said something that froze his blood. There are more like me, she whispered. Teachers who love too much, mothers who can't let go. They hide in plain sight. Ben stood up, speechless. The guards escorted her away, her voice fading down the hallway, repeating softly, "Be good, children. Don't tell them where we are." Outside, the sky was gray again. Rain began to fall, thin and cold. Ben looked back at the prison once before driving away. He felt as if her words had followed him, like ghosts sitting quietly in the back seat. Months later, he wrote his final story, The Perfect Teacher, where evil wore a smile. He ended it with one haunting line. Evil doesn't always scream. Sometimes it whispers lullabies, but even after publishing it, peace never came. Strange reports started to appear. In other towns, at other schools, a teacher disappearing suddenly, a child gone missing for a few days, found unharmed but silent. When asked what happened, the child would only say, "She said we were safe." Ben read those reports with shaking hands. Was it just coincidence, or something Clara had predicted? One rainy night, as he sat in his office alone, he heard a soft knock at the door. He opened it. No one was there, only a small envelope on the floor. Inside was a single note written in neat handwriting. The class is never over. Ben stared at the words, heart pounding. He looked out into the dark street, but no one was there. Just the echo of rain, falling endlessly, as if the story wasn't finished after all. And somewhere, in another quiet town, a teacher's gentle voice said, "Good morning, class. Let's begin."